Hello, everybody. I'm Rahul. I'm the founder and CEO of Superhuman, where we're building the fastest email experience in the world. Our customers get through their inbox twice as fast as before, reply to their important emails sooner, and see inbox zero for the first time in years. This is the story of how we built a product market fit engine. Now, product market fit is the number one reason why startups succeed. And the lack of product market fit is the number one reason why startups fail. But what really is product market fit? Well, Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, would say it's when you made something that people want. Sam Altman would say it's when users spontaneously tell other people to use your product. But it is perhaps Mark Andreessen who has the most vivid definition. He would say, you can always feel it when product market fit is not happening. Customers aren't quite getting value. Users aren't growing that fast. Word of mouth is not spreading. Press reviews are kind of blah, and the sales cycle takes too damn long. But you can always feel it when product market fit is happening. Customers are buying as fast as you can add servers. You're hiring sales and support as fast as you can. Reporters are calling you about your hot new thing. Investors are staking you outside your house, and money is piling up in your checking account. This is indeed a vivid definition, and one that I was staring at through tears in the summer of 2017. It seems so subjective, so unactionable. What do you do if by this definition, you don't have product market fit? Indeed, can you measure product market fit? If you can, then maybe you can optimize it. Maybe you can systematically, even numerically, increase product market fit. And as it turns out, the answer is yes. You can measure product market fit and you can optimize it. But before I share how, let's wind the clock back by 10 years. 10 years ago, I started this company, Reportive. We built the first Gmail plugin to scale to millions of users. When people emailed you, we showed you what they looked like, where they worked, their recent tweets, and links to their social profiles. We grew rapidly, and 2 years later, we were acquired by LinkedIn. Now, during those 4 years, I developed a very intimate view of email. I could see Gmail getting worse every single year, becoming more cluttered, using more memory, consuming more CPU, slowing down your machine, and still not working properly offline. And on top of this, people were installing plugins like ours, Reportive, but also Boomerang, Mixmax, Clearbit, you name it, they had it. And each plugin took these problems of clutter, memory, CPU performance offline and made all of them dramatically worse. We decided it was time for change. And so in the summer of 2015, we set up our office, this was our fancy sign, and we started to write code. In the summer of 2016, we were still coding. And in the summer of 2017, we were still coding. I felt this incredible, intense pressure to launch, both from the team and also from within myself. After all, Reportive had launched, scaled, and been acquired in less time. And here we were, 2 years in, and we still had not launched. But deep down inside, I knew, no matter how intensely I felt the pressure, a launch would go very badly. It would not be the Mark Andreessen story. I did not believe we had product market fit. And although I knew it, I couldn't just say that to the team. These are super ambitious, hyper intelligent engineers. They poured their hearts and their souls into the product. I needed a plan. And so, in the April of 2017, I started my search for the Holy Grail, for a way to define product market fit, for a metric to measure product market fit, and for a methodology to systematically increase product market fit. I searched high and low. I read everything I could find, spoke with all the experts, and I came across this guy, Sean Ellis. Now, Sean ran growth. In the early days at Dropbox, LogMeIn, and Eventbrite, he coined the term growth hacker. And as vivid and as compelling as Andreessen's definition of product market fit is, it is still a lagging indicator. By the time cash is piling up in your bank account, you already have product market fit. Now, Sean found a leading indicator, one that is benchmarked and predictive. Just ask your users this: how would you feel if you could no longer use the product? And measure the percent who answer very disappointed. After benchmarking hundreds of startups, Sean found that the companies that struggle to grow always get less than 40% very disappointed, and the companies that grew the most easily always get more than 40%. If more than 40% of your users would be very disappointed without your product, you have initial product market fit. Now, this example shows that very same question answered by 731 Slack users, 51% of whom would be very disappointed without Slack. Now, 51 is greater than 40, and so Slack has product market fit. Today, this may seem self-evident, but this example shows just how hard it is to beat that 40% benchmark. This metric is more objective than a feeling. This metric predicts success better than Net Promoter Score. And this metric is not only the best way to measure product market fit, it lets you develop your very own product market fit engine. For with this engine, you have a methodology for increasing product market fit. And the engine can even generate your roadmap for you. Step 1 is to survey. Email these 4 questions to every single user. You should only send these questions when users have experienced the core of your product. At Superhuman, we wait until they've had 3 weeks. Analyze the results to question number 1. You'll end up with results something like these. These are the actual numbers from Superhuman in summer of 2017. We very clearly did not have product market fit. Now that may seem sad, but I at least could explain our situation to the team. And most excitingly, I had a plan to increase our product market fit score, which brings us to step 2 of the engine, segment. We want to understand who are the people who really love our product. I like to use the concept of the high expectation customer, which is a concept that I found from Julie Supan. Now, Julie led early marketing at Dropbox, Airbnb, and many other great companies. The HXC is the most discerning person in your target demographic. They will enjoy your product for its greatest benefits, and they will spread the word. Most importantly, others want to be like them because they seem clever, judicious, and insightful. For example, the Dropbox HXC simply wants to simplify their life. They're very trusting, they're technically savvy, and they're looking to save time. At the end of the day, they want to know that somebody has their back when it comes to their life's work. I'm an example of the Dropbox HXC, and I'm sure many of us here are also. The Airbnb HXC does not simply want to visit new places, they want to belong. They want to experience Paris as if they really live there. Airbnb's early success came from focusing on these influencers and tastemakers. So how do you create your own HXC? Take the users who would be very disappointed without your product and analyze their answers to question number 2. Who do you think this is best for? This is a very powerful question, as happy users will almost always describe themselves, but using the words that matter most to them. You can then turn these words into a rich and detailed explanation of your own HXC. Meet Nicole, the Superhuman HXC. Nicole is a hard-working professional who deals with many people. She may be an executive, a founder, an investor, or a manager. She works long hours and often into the weekend. She considers herself very busy, and she wishes she had more time. Nicole feels she is productive. She's self-aware enough to realize she could be better, and she'll occasionally investigate ways to improve. Now, she spends much of her day in her inbox. On a typical day, she'll read 100 to 200 emails and send a further 15 to 40. On a very busy day, she might send as many as 80. Critically, Nicole considers it part of her job to be responsive, and she prides herself on being so. She knows that being unresponsive could block her team, damage her reputation, or cause missed opportunities. Nicole aims to get to inbox 0, but gets there at most 2 or 3 times a week. Very occasionally, perhaps once a year, she'll declare email bankruptcy. She generally has a growth mindset. She is open-minded about new products and keeps up to date with technology, but she may have a fixed mindset about email. Whilst open to new clients, she is skeptical that one could make her faster. Let's go back to the survey. Take each response and assign a persona to each one. And here's the magic. Take the users who most love your product, those who would be very disappointed without your product, and use them to narrow the market. In this simplified example, we're going to focus on founders, managers, executives, and people in business development. We're going to deliberately ignore sales, customer success, engineers, and data science. And just by segmenting, our product's market fit score jumps by 10 to 32%. We're not quite at 40% yet, but we made significant progress in just 2 minutes. On to step 3 of the engine, analyze. We now need to understand 2 things. Why do people really love our product? And what holds people back from loving our product? To understand why people love our product, we go back to the survey. And once again, we focus only on users who would be very disappointed without it. We then analyze the results to question number 3. What is the main benefit you receive from our product? Here are some example answers for Superhuman. Processing email is much faster. I get through my inbox in half the time, more efficient with my time, work through incoming email more quickly, speed, aesthetics, I can do everything from the keyboard. I like to create a big word cloud. It becomes as clear as day. People love Superhuman for its speed, focus, and keyboard shortcuts. Now, we want to grow the size of the very disappointed crowd. First, and as painful as it is, we have to ignore the not disappointed crowd. They are so far from loving the products that they are essentially a lost cause. Now, this is important because they will ask for all kinds of distracting things. And as counterintuitive as it may feel, do not act on their feedback. That leaves just the somewhat disappointed crowd. Maybe we can help them fall in love with our product. We most certainly can. But again, and I cannot stress this enough, do not act directly on their feedback. Many of them will remain somewhat disappointed no matter what you do for them, and so their requests are just distracting. So how do we decide who to listen to? Well, here's the trick. We use the main benefit of the very disappointed users to segment the somewhat disappointed users. First, the somewhat disappointed users for whom speed was not the main benefit. I strongly advise that you ignore these folks because the main benefit does not resonate with them. Even if you built everything they wanted, they are unlikely to fall in love with your product. Second, the somewhat disappointed users for whom speed was the main benefit. We pay very special attention to these because our main benefit does resonate, but something, probably something small, holds them back. So how do we figure out what? Well, we analyze their responses to the 4th and final question: how can we improve our product for you? As before, I like to create a word cloud. And here are the results for Superhuman. Back in 2017, the main thing holding back our users was simple. It was the lack of a mobile app, which we, of course, have since addressed. But then it got less obvious and more interesting. Integrations, attachment handling, calendaring, unified inbox, better search, read receipts, and so on into the long tail. To increase your product market fit score, all you have to do is build these things. That would convert those users who are only somewhat disappointed without your product into fanatics who love your product. This brings us on to step 4 of the product's market fit engine, implement. We now understand why users love our product, and we understand what holds users back. To increase our product's market fit score, we should spend half our time doubling down on what users love. In our case, even more speed, shortcuts, efficiency, and aesthetics. And just as importantly, we should spend half our time systematically addressing what holds users back. If we only double down on what users love, as vision-driven teams tend to do, we would not increase our product's market fit score. But if we only address objections, as data-driven teams tend to do, a competitor would eventually overtake us. This is your new roadmap. It automatically writes itself. This brings us on to the 5th and final step of the product's market fit engine, track. The framework will work, but there are no silver bullets. And as you double down on what users love and as you address what holds users back, you should constantly survey new users. I recommend tracking your product's market fit score every week, month, and quarter. In the summer of 2017, our product's market fit score was 33%. After a quarter, it was 47%. Next quarter, it was 56%. And the quarter after that, 58%. 58% of our users would be very disappointed without Superhuman. The product's market fit engine really does work. It gives you a way to define product's market fit, a metric to measure products market fit, and a methodology to increase products market fit. It will even write your roadmap for you. I do hope you consider using this at your startup, and if you do, please let me know. I'd love to help in any way that I can. Here's how you can contact me. I'm Rahul at superhuman.com, and my DMs on Twitter are open, Rahul Vohra. And if you want to access Superhuman, folks in the Coda community can skip the line. Just sign up at superhuman.com/coda. And finally, as an extra special treat for the Coda community, you can read about this methodology in detail, and you can also read through all the original Superhuman survey data in my Coda article on product market fit. That's it from me. Thank you for listening.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Rahul. I love how systematic that approach is. And now I'm like, I got to sign up. So now we're going to transition into Q&A from our audience. And the first question is, I hear that it's Inbox Zero Day. And in true celebration for the holiday, do you have any tips on how to get to Inbox Zero?
Hey there. I only just got my audio working there. So it sounds like the question was, any tips to get to Inbox Zero, is that right?
Yes, it is Inbox Zero Day. We want the tips. Spill it.
Oh my gosh, there are so many. Well, first of all, use Superhuman. Should go without saying. Second of all, learn all the keyboard shortcuts. It is a remarkably faster experience when you can drive not just your email, but every piece of software that you drive from the keyboard. Thirdly, stop marking unread. This one might sound a little bit more unusual, but archive instead. So why is this important? Well, if you're the kind of person who marks as unread, let's think about the psychology there. I used to be as well. I'll raise my hand too. What's going to happen is you're going to get a shiny new email. Maybe the subject line is enticing, or perhaps it's from your manager or your boss, or something that's just you've been waiting for. What might happen is you'll open it because you can't resist. It takes a tremendous amount of willpower, and in any case, we only have a finite amount per day, so we should be preserving it. And then what do? Well, you're like, well, there is a to-do item here, or I need to come back to this later, or it will take time, so I will mark as unread. But guess what? You do that several times later on per day, and then when you're finally done, you move on to the next thing. Not only is that taking N actions for each time you read it, it's now also cluttering up your inbox. It's going to push other to-do items further down the screen. So a much better path is to have your inbox represent the set of things that it is that you have to do, to not really pay attention to the read status, and simply to archive emails when they're done. So that'd be tip number 3. Tip number 4 would be to use something like snippets. Tip number 5 would be to use, and by the way, that's a feature in Superhuman that dramatically cuts down on the amount of typing you need to do. And then tip number 5, I have many, but I'll draw the line here, is to use Remind Me. So many of us have what I call microtasks, and sometimes they're in a spreadsheet, sometimes they're in a to-do list, sometimes they're, unfortunately, in our minds. It's, oh, remember to follow up with so-and-so to get this project over the line. Or, oh my gosh, I should really stay on top of this other initiative that we have. Or, why didn't that person get back to me? And what happens is things start falling through the cracks. If every time you send an email, you know it's something you're likely to have to check back in on later, simply set a reminder when you actually intend to do that. Now, if you follow all of those 5 tips, you'll be at Inbox Zero in no time.
Excellent. Now I'm adding those to my micro tasks that I have to now send a reminder to do. And that's going to be my thing after we chat. So the next question we have is, taking a look at that product market fit, how did your team feel about ignoring that large percentage of the users when establishing that product market fit? It seems like that would be a very intense process. Walk us through that.
It's counterintuitive, but it's very necessary. Mm-hmm. One of the key things that folks mistake about product market fits, and hopefully became apparent to you over the course of the last 15 minutes or so, is that most of us, because we're product people or we're engineers, or the thing that we can directly, visibly control is our product, we obsess over changing the product. And most of us actually forget that we can just as easily control the market as well. So that's the first observation. We have just as much control over the market as we do the product itself. Now, when you start to absorb that, it then becomes, I think, immediately apparent that not everybody is the market. And if you actually went after everybody and you listened to all the requests, what you'd end up with is a diluted, muddy mess that sort of has weird outgrowths in every direction of product development that you can think of, but not along the paths that matter. And so the whole point of the products market fit engine is to increase the size of the pie that is very disappointed without your product, the people who are going to love your product. And there are two ways to do that. And like I said, 50-50. 50% of your time should go into doubling down on the things that people love. And 50% of your time should be addressing the objections of the somewhat disappointed users for whom the main benefit resonates. Those are the folks who are the most close to falling in love with your product. If you listen to any other segment, the people who are somewhat disappointed but for whom the main benefit did not resonate, or the people who weren't disappointed at all, guess what? You'll end up with a muddy mess that isn't going to succeed.
Yeah, that actually ends up, it seems like much more empowering then for someone who's building a product to be building it for that person who loves you back. I love that. The next question that we have is, are there any cases where NPS is a better or worse indicator or signal than the disappointment score that you have outlined? Kind of those two together?
It's a different metric altogether. And anyone who's used Superhuman will know that we actually track both numbers in our survey. We ask the 4 product market fit survey questions and then the 3 net promoter score questions. They measure different things and they have different drivers. What the product market fit score measures is a degree of necessity. You can think of it as dependence, also a degree of emotional connection. So it measures those 3 things that your customers have with your product. What the net promoter score measures is quite literally how promoting your audience is about your product. Now, I do believe in today's world, any successful consumer internet product needs both of those scores to be high. But a startup or a new product inside of a larger organization only has a certain amount of resource to deploy on these problems. So what do you do? What I think you do is you sequence them. The thing that is absolutely critical to get right early is the product market fit score. That is really a reflection of your product and your onboarding process. But then you relatively quickly thereafter have to get to an optimized net promoter score. But that's more of a reflection of your wider company, your brand, your customer support group, your everything, really. And so we measure both, we optimize both, but it is possible to sequence them.
I like it. It's sort of each of these then give you the different pictures of your business, right? The development part of your business and then the go-to-market aspect of your business. And they give you that complete picture. That's fascinating. The next question that we have is, beyond just feature launches, how are you telling your HXCs that you're listening to what they want? How do you close that loop?
The same way we do for our non-HXCs. We've built a whole infrastructure around loop closing. Whenever we receive any email or any piece of feedback, we actually tag and triage the words of the customer verbatim. And we've built hooks into Superhuman to do this. We now use Help Scouts to run our email customer support. And I think to date, we've tagged and triaged 75,000 different words of the customer. We actually have put these into Coda as well. And what's really exciting is what we're able to do is for any given thing that any customer have said, we know who said it, when they said it, what it was about. It's sort of tagged against the platform, web or mobile, but even down to the feature or the GitHub issue. Now, when the feature is built or the GitHub issue is closed, we can then close the loop with everybody who mentioned that particular topic. No matter how far back in the past it may have been. Sometimes it's 2, 3, maybe even 4 years ago that we finally circled around to building an esoteric setting that maybe only 15 people had asked for. But guess what? Those 15 people are now the happiest people alive, and they're going to be your biggest evangelists. So I'd highly recommend deliberately building loop closing infrastructure.
Yeah, excellent. We actually use something very similar here at Coda, where we have, obviously, spoiler alert, a Coda Doc, and the same thing of like, let's come ahead and close that loop. Fantastic. The next question that we have from the audience is, would there be anything that you might have done differently with this approach if you were building on rather enterprise or B2B products?
Great question. Easy answer. Two parallel sets of surveys. So you're going to have a product market fit survey for the end users. And in today's world of enterprise software, unless it's something very specific, your end users are going to need to be happy. They are an input into the buying decision these days, but also the other stakeholders. Now, in the simplest configuration, it's your end users and the buyers. But depending on your industry, depending on your product, you may have other major stakeholders. Maybe legal is really big in your field, or maybe compliance, or maybe there's a privacy component to what you do, and the privacy officer has to weigh in. But in its simplest form, two parallel sets of surveys and get to 40% plus on both of them.
Nice. Excellent. So the next question we have from the audience is back to startup land. So how do you recommend evangelizing and integrating this system in a startup to drive that roadmap, particularly in a culture where there are lots of suggestions and decisions are being made from user feedback ad hoc?
Oh gosh, wow. Congrats to whoever asked this. They managed to ask many questions at the same time. All right, so we have evangelizing, we have integrating, we have a strong opinionated culture, which is great, and then we have ad hoc response to feedback. Here we go. Okay.
Stretch it out.
I know, right? How do I recommend evangelizing? Have everybody watch this talk. I've got it down to 15 minutes. It's tried and tested and proven. It really does work. It worked for Superhuman. It works for every company I've ever invested in. It's become sort of the default way that venture-backed companies in the earlier stages measure progress. Just appeal to authority and social proof if necessary. The evidence is there. The second piece is, how do you integrate the system? Okay, so system integration, non-trivial. Definitely get an ops or an infrastructure person on this. The person who did this at Superhuman was our head of growth at the time, Gaurav. He came from an ETL analytics management consulting background, so the perfect background for all of this. And we tied together a relatively complex infrastructure of email and Typeform and Send With Us and SendGrid and our own internal analytics tools, so that the whole thing runs as a machine. You do not want this to be manual. It's way too much work. But now, and actually very early in Superhuman, automatically, whenever any user hit the threshold of, I think it was something like 3 weeks in or sent more than 20 emails, boom, they'd get the email. They go then to a Typeform. The responses are collected. You could, of course, use Coda to do the same thing. And then it sort of flows down into downstream analytics, which then eventually surface into weekly reports and dashboards. There's a lot of stuff there. You don't need to build all of this overnight, but it is important to actually automate some of these things. Yeah. Okay. And then finally, very quickly, just touching upon the culture question. I'll try and answer this one super fast. The whole point of this system is to provide an objective lens that isn't driven by the loudest voice in the room. It isn't driven by opinion. It isn't driven by authority, but it's driven by two streams of data. What are the things that people love and how can we double down on that? And there's room for art and brainstorm in that. And then what are the objections that people have and how do we address that in order? And there's room for strategy in there. And I found that this eradicates most of the sort of ad hoc response that you may otherwise encounter.